Petunia was a sweet little girl with a beautiful singing voice. When she was very little, life was tough. Really tricky things happened, and there was no one who could understand and help her. No one to comfort her. Every time a tricky thing happened, it was like a rock appeared in her heart. She didn't like thinking about it, so she took it out. But try as she might, she couldn't put it down or throw it away. It just kept coming back like a boomerang. And every time another awful thing happened, a new rock would appear. And every time Petunia would try and throw it away, and it would just keep coming back. Petunia didn't want anyone else to see the rocks. She was embarrassed. She didn't want them appearing back in front of her friends. So she got a rucksack and she hid all the rocks in it and she carried them around. At least then she was in control of them. They were really heavy. It wasn't easy, but she couldn't put them down or get rid of them. And at least this way, no one else had to know they were there. She didn't have to tell anyone what was in her bag. When she grew up, she moved away and the tricky things stopped happening. Petunia had always loved to sing and joined a rock band. She was such a good singer that she became the lead singer of the band. The band became more and more famous. Everyone had heard of Petunia and the Punks. Everyone wanted tickets to their concerts. Everyone wanted Petunia's autograph and to get a selfie with her. And everyone wondered why Petunia always carried a rucksack. She was able to put it down and forget about it while she performed, but she knew if she didn't pick it up again immediately afterwards, the rocks would spring out and everyone would see them. So whenever she wasn't performing, Petunia would be carrying her bag. "What's in your bag?" people would ask. "It must be something important." Petunia wouldn't say. She couldn't. It was too big a secret and too difficult and too different. No one else had rocks like this. No one could possibly understand. It was clearly very weird. And if people knew, perhaps they'd think she was very weird. And in fact, she worried that she was very weird. She was sure the reason she had rocks was because there was something wrong with her. And she was worried if her fans and her friends knew about the rocks, they'd find out she wasn't who they all thought she was, and they'd think she was bad. And so she kept on lugging her bag of rocks. Poor Petunia. Rocks are heavy. It makes everything so much harder when you have to carry a rock around with you. But carrying a whole bag full of rocks is a nightmare. But she didn't dare tell anyone or let anybody carry it for her. Petunia and the Punks had a lovely manager called Lula. She managed lots of bands and looked after lots of stars. She loved caring for her acts and helping them feel okay. One day she said to Petunia, "Do you know, I've had other acts that have carried about heavy burdens in bags. What would you like in your sandwich?" Petunia just nodded. It was interesting, but she was pretty sure that Lula's other acts couldn't have boomerang rocks in their bags like hers. That was just her. Another day, Lula said, "Wow, your bag is so heavy. The way you're holding your back makes it look like there's rocks in there. That must be so hard for you to carry alone. I'm sorry you have to feel like that." Petunia went quiet and nodded. Sometime later, Petunia was getting on the tour bus and slipped. The rocks banged into the side of the bus and made a crunching sound. Afterwards, Lula asked if she was okay. Petunia was so upset that in a moment of weakness she said, "Why do I feel like I have to carry these rocks?" Lula said, "Perhaps they're the kind of rocks that you can't get rid of alone. Perhaps they just keep coming back." Petunia said nothing, but she began to think that perhaps Lula might actually understand. A week or so later, when she was feeling brave, Petunia asked Lula about rocks that wouldn't go away, and whether people that had them just had to keep carrying them forever. Lula replied, "With those kind of boomerang rocks, there's really only one thing that can get rid of them, but it's normally the hardest thing for the person carrying them to do. When you take out a boomerang rock and show it to someone else, it dissolves, it disappears, and is no more. Just like this. Let me show you." And Lula got a bath bomb. They filled the bath with water and dropped it in. They both watched as it fizzed and bubbled and melted, and finally it was gone. "The problem," said Lula, "is that taking a rock out into the open when it's been hidden for so long can feel overwhelmingly difficult. It can feel just too hard, too scary. In my experience, the person carrying the rocks thinks other people will think they are bad, they are weird, or there's something wrong with them. They worry that the other person will think badly of them. People with boomerang rocks always think it's their fault they've got them, and they always think that if they take them out, other people will think bad things about them. Petunia thought a lot. She couldn't quite believe that anyone could really understand. For so long she'd been so sure they wouldn't. Her rocks weren't like anyone else's. And maybe it was better to carry them than to risk having people she loved think bad things about her. But maybe, just maybe, they wouldn't. Petunia was also worried that it wasn't just her they'd think bad things about. What about other people who'd been around when the rocks first appeared? What if they got into trouble? What if people thought bad things about them? Or bad things happened to them? Maybe it was her duty to keep on carrying these rocks to protect others. A different day, Petunia was in Lula's camper van and Lula was making her a mug of hot chocolate. As she was stirring, Petunia said, "Do you know, keeping boomerang rocks in the dark doesn't protect anyone. Secrets can't make anything better. They just hurt people. It's always better for rocks to be out in the open, so that good, kind people can help anyone that's been hurt get the help they need. Now, would you like a brownie with your hot chocolate?" Petunia had listened to everything that Lula had said. That night, she took out of her bag a small, very heavy, very sharp, dark stone. It was a horrible secret. And it was the secret that stopped her taking out all the others. The dark stone whispered again the lie that she had heard so long ago. "If you show these stones to anyone else, then your mum will be struck by lightning and you'll not see her again." Petunia shuddered and put the stone back in her bag. Sometime later, in Lula's camper van, they were looking at the photo albums of the world-famous Dead Beats band when they were quite young. They were really quite old now, but still famous. Lula had managed them when they were new and young and needed looking after. Petunia noticed that the drummer, Steve, was carrying a heavy bag in all the photos off stage. Lula saw Petunia looking and said, "Do you know, Steve had a bag of rocks. It took him a year before he got the rocks out of that bag. He was so brave. The reason it took him so long was because one of the rocks had lied to him and told him that if he showed the rocks to anyone else, the earth would open up and swallow his dad." Can you believe it? Of course the earth can't open up and swallow someone else just because somebody else has looked in their bag. But Steve was told this when he was really little, and small children believe what they're told, even when they grow up. So he couldn't shake off the worry that the lie might be true. In the end, he was brave and showed me his rocks, and nothing happened to his dad. In fact, on that day, his dad won a gardening competition for the biggest marrow. It was a lie the rocks had told because they didn't want to be dissolved. A big, fat lie. Now, do you want some chocolate cake? That night, Petunia looked at her rocks and thought, perhaps they've been lying to me all this time. Maybe I don't have to carry them. Maybe I could try showing one to someone else and see what happens. That night, Petunia first began to hope, like the rays of light sneaking over the edge of the earth at sunrise while the world is still dark. What happened to Petunia in the end? Well, that's another story for another day, but I promise it does have a happy ending. But this story ends with hope. Hope that rocks don't have to be carried. Hope that the lies you were told when you were tiny don't have to be believed. Hope that the secrets you hold don't mean you're a bad person. And hope that those who love you will still love you when they know all that there is to know. The end.